This morning's panel is about dilemmas and opportunities for GIS. We've got some pretty cool speakers here. Pat Bresnahan is the GIO for Columbia County, South Carolina. And Monideep Nag, goes by Mo, is with NAG Inc. and here from Washington, D.C. And then Mladen Stojic is with ERDAS, now Intergraph ERDAS, in Norcross, Georgia. So if you guys wouldn't mind just add a little bit more to your introduction if you want to when you come up here. We'll go ahead and turn it over to Pat and see how all of this flows together, and then we'll open up to you guys.
Our discussion, we started off with wicked problems and how things are working now and our impressions of that and where they're going. And driving back and forth to home and other places, you think about things and these are in your head, and I have things that bug me, things that I ignore, and things that make me go, and make me think and go, wow, what, can we apply this here? And really, it's the third one that really energizes me. So I'm going to talk about a couple of those now, and one of the things, a big thing that really bugs me is conventional wisdom. And I have to tell you, I experience this all the time. Sometimes I call it the neighbor effect. You're looking at a piece of software or a solution. Well, all of our neighboring organizations have it, or all of our other agencies have it, so it can't be bad. That means we don't have to do our research and, well, we'll be in the same boat as them. Well, maybe it's not the best solution. And I've been on several committees in implementing technologies where the conventional wisdom was for X, and after we looked at it, we chose Y and are much happier. We did our own homework. The conventional wisdom was to go here. And what I've found is usually the conventional wisdom is usually the thing that drives me the most insane in daily work. Another thing that'll drive you insane is I'm really glad to see that, although we have this over here, nobody's touched that for the last 2 days. Nobody's even wanted to touch that. And that's great, because all of you have probably done the same thing as I have. Traveled to wherever a federal agency wants you to go for a weekend, and you sit in a hotel, 2 hotel rooms, and you sit around with a bunch of other people, and that's what you do. I've gone through these things, and I'm sure you have too. You sit in a room, you come up with great ideas, you come down to the common denominator that makes everybody in the room happy. And then you produce that. Again, that is not geospatial. But we've all seen slides like that. Every agency, and you just look at that thing and you go, really? Is that, how do we get anything out of that? But I am sure, and I started putting this presentation together by looking through federal agency geospatial slide presentations, and I decided it was best not to pick any of those because maybe they're in the room. But we all see this. What does that accomplish? What does that get done for me? And it's kind of interesting looking at all these programs and trying to do things from the ground up. And there are what, almost 3,000 county governments, several more thousand other smaller governments that do things every day. They're putting it together. They're doing the work. And as I mentioned yesterday in the panel on parcels, academically, it sounds pretty simple to have a national parcel data set. Well, let's just do this, and it flows up, and oh, that's great. It sounds pretty easy, but try doing it. There are people on the ground every day that are putting GPSs in ambulances. They're redoing trash collection. And as I've heard somebody, a friend of mine say, you know, if you want to really make a citizen mad, change the day their trash is collected. That's the kind of stuff that these people are on the ground doing every day. They're doing it. They're not usually in these meetings, but they're doing it. So when you look up and you see that all these programs are going on, do they affect you? Yes. Do you have time to deal with them? Probably not, because you have your own employer. You have to answer to them. You already have business cases to get your job done. And it's so bad that some states get together policies and look at things to say, look, stop asking us for data. Stop doing it. You're killing us. Just get together and ask us once. That'd be great. But this is what somebody at the local level may see as the federal response to that. I have all my parcel data for the entire country. This is great. Now what are you going to do with it? And it's even more absurd than that because that CD of Jackson Browne running on empty 30 years ago hasn't changed, but the parcel data in that wall changed yesterday. So having it done, there has to be a business case to do it. We always have business cases at the local level. We have a lot to do. There has to be a return on investment. Where's the big return on investment? What business is driving it? And I think the big thing we've missed is the consumer mentality. And Mo and I were talking earlier, in the stats we saw yesterday about geospatial professionals, the people are doing the coolest stuff, getting things done now, aren't even geospatial professionals. They're not in those numbers. There's so much cool going on there right now. Open source folks are doing a lot of great stuff. Your cell phone, I bet you most of the geospatial stuff on your phones and your tablets aren't even done by GIS folks. That's great. I think that's awesome. And I think we've been stuck in this mentality of this is the way we must do things for a number of years, and we haven't moved forward. This is my vision of what GIS looks like right now. I kid you not. We had a tech call a couple weeks ago about our software that we pay a lot of money for, and there's a bug in the software, and they said, okay, we can solve that. Use this extension. Oh, wait a minute, this extension, so we have to buy another box in there to solve the problem? That doesn't make any sense. Right now, I can get my data anywhere I want if it's media. Consumers get it. They drive what's going on. They drive where the data are, when they want it, how they want to get it. And we're all becoming part of the network. And that's where we are now. And just the last slide is authoritative data. We don't have to worry about authoritative data. When it stops becoming useful, we stop using it. Volunteered information, I thought bogus until I went to Disney World with my kids and figured out I can get hop-in lines much quicker if I volunteer information and get it back from everybody else. And that leads into Google traffic. Use it all the time. Volunteered. I'm not an authoritative source when I'm driving around, but I'm part of the system.
So I'm just going to give a little background about what we do in our company. Our company is about 20 years old. We've been working with municipalities throughout the US for the last 20 years and with geospatial only. Our deployments have worked with, we've been doing deployments with every single department within municipalities. But we've been doing all kinds of different visualization systems and integration for response. I like to actually show less slides and more GIS within what we do. It's not the typical GIS, it's mostly Google Earth Enterprise. I actually had it up earlier, but what I'm going to show is what that globe looks like and how it's always live and real-time information feeding into it. What we're going to be looking at is just one of the globes which the police department uses, and of course it's filtered for just some of the information that we're sharing. What we do is we customize these globes for different agencies. As they just, as they open this globe, it actually loads only their information and the information that they care about. One of the data sets that I like to highlight is ShotSpotter. It's real-time gunshots fired in Washington, D.C. And of course, this is the last 3 days, but it's live. There's live sensors throughout the district. As soon as there's a gunshot, it zooms into that location and you see the police cars, the fire ambulances, all of that converging. And visually, you get to see and plan these things. Then on top of that, of course, the real-time information with police cars here. Let's see if I always have all of that separated by status of the car responding and whatnot. Then you have off-duty officers and things like that. Some of the layers that we integrate with, they're actually Excel spreadsheets that people are maintaining, and we're tying directly into not only complete databases, but also unstructured data sets, like Excel Access, all of that. One of the other solutions is suspicious activity reporting, which we map out, and we do a basic geospatial check to see exactly like within a radius, which agencies. It's hard to see here, but these are all different agencies around that suspicious package, and we notify all these agencies with the stuff. Let me quickly jump to that slide. Because of our suspicious activity reporting solution, we actually created a mobile app that triggers these suspicious activities that they get. And we were called in by JPDO, Joint Planning Development Office. Now, this is a group of all these large agencies that plan next-gen operations. We were called in to do the 911, how you prevent the next 911, and for this past event. And it was tying in all these different information from all these different agencies. And the live information was actually this, right? Our application would get the 911 call or the mobile app reporting solution, go to, and then check the surrounding critical infrastructure assets around that point, and then notify all those agencies that were affected, right? Federal, state, local, police departments, schools, all of that. And then also dynamic events like conferences or sporting events and all that. So these are all the different types of agencies, and this particular suspicious activity was near the White House, and of course we notified the Secret Service and then also FBI and all of these other agencies involved. Now, this is an example of real-time integration with what we're doing. Actually, let me see if I can find test. So along with our distribution, we also provide real-time information, which is this. This is the suspicious activity reporting. This is in a big...
Multiple gunshots fired at 1716 North Street, SC.
So this is a gunshot that was recently fired. Live ambulances and police cars will converge, which I have off right now. And this solution also, the latest version is coming with camera, the nearest webcam, street view, as well as other features that we're dropping in live in real time to monitor and respond to units. So with that, I'm going to just jump to our next speaker. Of course, I've got a lot more, but if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me.
Thanks, Rob. So I work for Intergraph, which is actually now part of Hexagon, which is a bigger geospatial company located in Europe, specifically in Sweden. What I wanted to sort of add to the great presentation so far is sort of the software perspective, or from a vendor's perspective, how do we bring geospatial information to the world, and really what are some of the challenges and some of the obstacles that have to be overcome in order to extend the utilization of geospatial information to the world. And the analogy I want to start with is the music industry, and I think it's something we can all relate to. As someone who really enjoys music, I think this makes a lot of sense. And I'll sort of walk through a historical perspective, if that's okay. Starting in 1899, Thomas Edison introduced the phonograph, and there was an ecosystem around music at that time. But I think this was quite revolutionary from a perspective of being able to record music and play music. Jump 40 years to the 40s, and you now have the ability to create vinyl records and have an infrastructure to record music from various genres. Go to the 50s, we have a mass explosion of not only standard records, but a smaller record of 45, where singles can be recorded and subsequently sold. Record stores are starting to pop up and so forth. Jump to the 60s, we have the introduction of the 8-track. And once again, a new medium, a new ecosystem for recording, selling both hardware and content, music, and quite a big business started from all of this in the 60s. Enter the 70s, and you have the tape cassette. And this was very interesting because you now have the ability to achieve mobility. You can take your tape cassette, put it in your car, and there was a business around that, of course. You can take it in your Walkman and walk around, jog, exercise, and so forth. There was a business around that. And then, of course, with the bigger players as well. Jump to the 80s. We have the introduction of the compact disc, and this is very, very revolutionary from a perspective of being able to spread the recording and the listening and consumption of music in cars, computers, in the office, on the go, at home, and so forth. Enter the 90s, and we have the digital age, specifically with things like Napster, where you have brokering services and transaction-based models for uploading, sharing, disseminating, and delivering music from a variety of options, and sort of the utilization of this content dramatically increased. Enter the 2000s, you have Apple with its whole ecosystem associated with digital entertainment, the iPad, the iPhone, the iTouch, and so forth. And what was really cool is people who've always made music can now make music and sort of get it online, sell it, and basically have a marketplace wherein they can actually promote the thing they create and the thing they love to a global audience, not simply limited to a local county, city, a local audience, and so forth. And this is important because we really, through this evolution, we've empowered, or the music industry has really empowered 1 billion people, really, to make music, to sell music, to buy music, and share music. And you're probably asking yourself, what does this mean for geospatial, and how do we sort of relate geospatial to that? But I think it's important to look at the ecosystem and how we got to where we are today in the music industry, and then relate geospatial to that. You have a whole framework for those consuming content. They buy the necessary devices to consume. And when I say consume, I mean listen, view, read, and so forth. You have the content creator who use platform technologies to build applications, build those capabilities that people can then use and consume. You have the providers of content, those that make the music, that sell the music, that make the applications, that make Angry Birds and things like that, and sort of get that into this marketplace. Then you got the cloud making this enabling technology available to everyone so they can use it. So let's sort of look at geospatial, and where are we? Where are we with geospatial? Throughout history, we of course have had a need to record physical and human geography in a variety of different ways, starting with things like Ptolemy's map, or one of the first maps out there, being able to chart geographies for the purpose of navigation, and this was typically commissioned by kings but created by a few. Enter the 1700s, you have surveying, of course, starting way back in the Egyptian times, but accurate surveying devices being created to survey for the purpose of creating land registers, cadastres commissioned by governments, and so forth. Jump to the 1900s, you have surveying from the air, photogrammetry. You have the ability to put a camera on a balloon or a plane, fly regions, collect that content, and subsequently create large-scale maps that can then be used for a variety of applications. Jump to the 60s, you have GIS. If those of you that have been involved in GIS for a while, this is probably familiar to you, the tapes and the cartridges and feeding all that stuff into the system. Then of course CAD for high accuracy surveys. You have then this digital movement going from paper maps to digital maps through the use of high-end computers and processing, and we now have digital records of information. Jump to the 70s, remote sensing. We now have the ability to move beyond where to what. Is that a tree? Is that corn? Is that wheat? Is that vegetation healthy? We now go from where to what, and I think that's pretty important. Jump to the 90s, we have 3D, graphics card, an ecosystem around graphics cards, being able to view things in 3D. The earth isn't flat. GPS, the ability to track location wherever you go. Web mapping, where the internet's meeting geography. LiDAR mapping. Terrestrial mapping, going inside buildings. 4D mapping, mobile mapping. We have all these genres that have been sort of created over the last 200 years, but are we really enabling a new type of user, a new generation of users to build their own applications and to get information into the hands of the people that really need it? From a vendor's perspective, we're sort of looking at this problem and asking ourselves, why are we stuck? We're stuck because we have a lot of data that's locked in and only a few understand, whether it's an ISO metadata profile or whether it's an XML or a GML or an OGC service with all these different tags. It's confusing. So we have data that's locked in and locked away with only those folks that understand it. We have departmental silos that don't necessarily collaborate and sort of share content easily and effectively for the purpose of getting things done. Then you have the human factor, the psychological factor. I grew up a surveyor, okay? And I know when someone asked me, what does GIS mean to you? I would typically answer by saying, get it surveyed, okay? A surveyor thinks a certain way. A photogrammetrist thinks a certain way. A GIS professional thinks a different way. We have these psychologies and these personas that have sort of been built up, and unfortunately are sort of preventing the collaboration and the mixing of genres inside organizations. And we're really stuck with this passive and static notion of geospatial technologies. And what we really lack, and if I look at that Apple slide, what we really lack is an ecosystem that allows us to leverage open source software with other software applications, connecting to content, whether it's from a federal agency, a local agency, a commercial agency, and sort of building applications with data to provide dynamic information to our users. What this means is basically mixing and really fusing the genres of surveying, photogrammetry, remote sensing, and GIS and CAD through an engine. And I'm not even being specific to what engine, but being able to put engines together in order to accelerate towards the ability to deliver information to mobile apps, to interactive dynamic apps, as Mo just showed us, to 5D worlds where we have XYZ with time tied to information that makes it usable for folks to actually make a decision from what they're looking at. We gotta go from a complex sort of technology that's limited to a few to something that could be extended and used by many. And I think that's where the cloud and the web really play critical roles in getting us there. And lastly, what are some of the preconditions to success that we're looking at as a vendor to getting there? Once again, it's breaking down those walls. We have the ability to take software, whether it's GIS, remote sensing, photogrammetry, surveying software, which Hexagon all has with Intergraph, with ERDOS, with Leica. We have all that stuff, but it's fragmented. And we're looking at fusing those genres together and providing something that's usable. And this, of course, requires some ecosystem that allows us to tie the content to the delivery mechanism and get the information to the user. And this is all possible by this mixing approach, similar to music, where we can mix things together with data, with software to deliver solutions to our broader user community. Thanks, Tim.
Thoughts, comments, questions?
Thank you. To the gentleman representing ERDOS, while my name's Dave Skiles with Front Range Community College in Denver, Colorado. By background, a 25-year veteran of GIS. And so this is the problem that you discuss, is the classic problem that's always been there. And I can't help but wonder whether, as we watch the efforts to mix information together, whether or not we just need to be able to speak different languages. I'm fascinated with the ability of human beings, for example, to travel across places like Alsace-Lorraine in Europe, and you get on the train and all of a sudden the conversation switched from German to French in the middle of the train ride. Mm-hmm. And I can't help but think that perhaps it's useful for something to be capable of speaking, to be multilingual in many different information technologies. Is that your idea?
Absolutely. I mean, I think there's certainly a local flavor to both the development and the use of geospatial technologies. For example, if I just look at Hexagon and Intergraph, what we do, we have very different users of our systems and different requirements in different parts of the world. For example, in China, we have an ongoing project regarding the monitoring of dams. I don't know I can't recall how many they had, but they have more than apparently 400 dams, and they need a dynamic system through sensors and software, just like the SensorWeb example, where they can monitor things, and their requirements are very different, and their flavor is very different to what, let's say, to what's needed in Brazil, which we're working on a different project. So I think there's a global and then there's a local need, and forcing global needs to a local community that doesn't necessarily talk the same language doesn't make sense. I think standards have sort of helped allow us to communicate geographic knowledge and information across genres. I think the problem with standards is they're complex and they're too technical. You know, I've had to sit through, and I apologize to anyone that that's in the OGC here, I've had to sit through some OGC technical meetings, and it's hard to understand and it's hard to keep up, and I come from this space. I think what we've done is we've sort of complicated, the intentions are good, but I think we've complicated, along the way we sort of lost our way, we've complicated our ability to communicate geographically. And I see that everywhere. I mean, I go to a local county or a state government agency or federal agency, and the recent one is Swiss Topo in Switzerland, which is the national mapping agency for Switzerland. Their GIS folks are using Esri and some open source. Their photogrammetry guys are using Leica. Their remote sensing guys are using ERDOS. The cartographers are using some French package, which I've never heard of before, some local package. Then you got some server stuff with GeoServer mix in there. And they've sort of made it work, right? But it's really, it's only dependent on the 2 or 3 people that know how to put it all together and stitch it together. And to the end user, those public, tax-paying folks that consume the content from their portal and their system, they get the data, but there's a huge cost, and a lot of governments are asking themselves, this is really expensive, we can't maintain this. And there's certainly an ROI problem that many of these organizations that we deal with are starting to have. So I think we're getting there, but we're not there yet. I still think we're stuck in the cassette player ages, where we're sort of, we're moving towards a digital age, but we're kind of stuck. And I think to your original question, there is a need for local implementations and local requirements sort of percolating to the development of a system. But there has to be a common language or something that we use that will allow us to communicate regardless of where we are in the world. Yeah.
Other thoughts, comments?
Yeah, the standards, as you said, it's at the local level, you definitely want standards in, say, your computer-aided dispatch for your fire or ambulance, but, standards are great, but everybody has one, and if you have these national groups who are setting these standards, you have local governments that have had their standards in place for 15, 20 years. They're not going to change those. Their ambulances work. They can't change them. The cost is prohibitive. The return on investment is not there. And to have some sort of technology, I don't think we have the Roku box of spatial data yet. It's what we need. I don't think it's here. I don't have the answer. But I know those standards are great locally, but trying to do that even across county boundaries is difficult.
That's actually one of the things that, when we deploy in different agencies throughout the country, we've noticed that, exactly like you said, different municipalities, even across the border, they have completely different set of requirements and needs, and it's very difficult to communicate across those boundaries. And to be able to set those standards from a national level makes it even more difficult.
And don't get locals wrong. Great national efforts, those are great, but if you flew here, you probably heard the same announcement. If you're traveling with children, we lose air pressure, put the mask on yourself first, right? Then your child. We have to take care of our own first. There's the return on investment for us committing resources to those things, that's way down the list of what they get done. They agree with them, they like them, but don't get your locals wrong. They just don't have the resources to meet what you, as say a federal organization, want.
Since we already have Google Earth and Google Maps, it seems like we already have bridged that gap to some extent and letting geographic information be widely available to users on the street. And it seems like your examples, even though they do provide information to a wide audience, there's always a vendor who's benefiting. So they are actually coming through a commercial operation. So I don't really see it changing. It seems like municipalities can put their layers on Google Maps right now, but they're not really motivated to do so. So maybe it's more of a motivation issue than a technology issue, unless I'm not understanding how Google Earth and Google Map work.
There are technology issues, and obviously local governments use their own, there is a vendor that they pay to put their data in, say, a certain type of database of geo content and trying to edit data on that and converting that out to, say, a KML. There are resources required to do that, try to automate it great, and we're looking at open source to try to solve some of those problems without that cost added to it. So there are hurdles. There are also, as we talked about parcels yesterday, they're not just technological hurdles. And as somebody said yesterday, gave the example about the Savannah Harbor and Charleston Harbor. It's a lot of those hurdles have nothing to do with us technology, and it's great. One of the things we started off in our talk on the phone was we try to push things, but we're GIS people. If things need to get done and there's a business case for it, like a banking industry, if the banking industry said, we need a national parcel data set, it would be done. As GIS folks trying to get it done, we're pushing the rock uphill. So the business case has not been made at this point, in my opinion.
Also, as far as you were discussing Google Maps, Google Earth, there is an enterprise version of the solution. But if you go up to these agencies and say, hey, you guys could actually leverage even the free version of Google Enterprise Solutions, you can definitely, the problem is not convincing the people that are putting in the money to provide, to get the solution done, but you have to convince the GIS people. The geospatial people are very, structured in the way they want to provide information and share information. So half these entities are afraid of Google, of those solutions, because they have so much invested in their existing geospatial infrastructure. So that convincing has to happen within the geospatial community who are putting these solutions together.
Keep in mind, we're all discussing with each other. I see a lot of the questions pointed at the panelists, which is fine, but any of you who feel you have an answer or response or a thought, feel free to have dialogue amongst yourselves as well.
The question I have is anyone here, and I've sort of browsed through the attendees, has anyone here provided content to Google?
Raise your hand if you provide content to Google.
If you do have the ability to provide content to Google, would you? Like your data, your geospatial data, your layers? You would?
When we were looking at it, there was some contract terms for providing free data to Google that we as the local government weren't really willing to accept. It was, we give them data, we accept all the risk for their use of the data, and if it's wrong in any way, it's on us to fix it within their holdings.
Yeah.
And that meant that we were taking on a lot of additional risk, but with limited reward to do so. This got caught up in the layers and it went away.
But the enterprise solution actually provides for you to manage your own data, which is you can update it yourself.
There's a comment from Art.
Yeah, speaking for pictometry, we could provide content to Google. In fact, they're working very hard to copy the process and not violate the patents. We do provide content to Microsoft Bing, so you can see all the imagery there. But here are the issues. Somebody's got to pay for all those aircraft and all those flights, and so it's a licensed product. And we'd love to put it out for free, but if we do that, then the whole thing dies.
Yeah.
So, it's one of those, who's going to pay for it? How is it going to get paid? Because it's easy to provide. Right now with pictometry imagery, it goes directly into ArcGIS. In fact, Image Server already has a transform tool in there that will take the non-trapezoidal projected oblique images and make them rectilinear projection imagery that it can use. So it isn't the technical issue, it's the licensing cost, paying for it issue. And if we can figure that one out, then we'll all have access to all of it. By the way, one thing that I wanted to mention, because you had the comment there with regard to people being frightened of Google. Well, people have been, when I first started using oblique imagery, people were frightened of this thing because it was so easy to use, and people that were not GIS people all of a sudden could see it, understand it, and use it. And what we found, what I've personally found, especially in the Atlanta region, is that the demand for GIS data increased 20-fold after they started using this easier way of viewing it and understanding it. So instead of being threatened by it, I explained to the GIS managers, this actually expands your support within the county, because now you've got 20 times as many people wanting your data. So instead of fooling around with just GIS maps and all of that, now you're providing some content and, quite frankly, doing more sophisticated and more interesting work.
I'd like to add something. I'm formulating a thought, so it's not complete. And I'm only taking the risk of putting it out there because maybe you guys can add to it. But so if you pick up the phone and you have a dial tone and you dial and you get connected, it's all good. How frustrating is it if you pick up the phone and there's no dial tone? Or, for example, you know, I'm abroad and I'm trying to get onto Pandora and I can't because they don't allow access to Pandora outside the country. So I can log into Pandora, I just can't get to the content. So what I'm thinking is you've got the equipment, you know, the vehicle, and you've got the data or the gas, the content. So I agree with what you're saying, Art. When you make the equipment easier, if you have an embedded iPod or whatever, I mean, access to the content is no longer a burden. But if the content's not there, or if it's not feeding you what you need, then it's completely frustrating. So there's both pieces that are almost equally important. Again, I'm still formulating this thought, but I guess a question or a way to put this back to you guys is, any of you guys, is how do we combine content with software as a service that merges the two together, so the user gets it in a format that they can utilize. And so the products are alive and they're dynamic versus static. And I don't know the answer to that question, but.
Well, I think that was a big part of our discussion.
Yeah.
I don't think we know.
Yeah.
I mean, whole consumerization, it's always, in our example, you know, who will control the GIS has been said by surveyors for years. Well, it's not us. It's not even us. It's out there. It's a cool technology. We haven't stepped to that consumerized version of it yet. And once we get to that consumerized version, I don't know how we do that. I don't know the magic engine that Mladen mentioned. If we had that magic engine, I think it solves the problem.
Yeah.
But I think that solution, in my opinion, will come from, I'm going to put a 50-50 wager on that it's going to come from outside the geospatial profession to make that happen.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about some points that were made in yesterday's panels. Nancy Von Meyer was talking, she gave several examples about the private sector offering security for residential homes. But then it's the government that has to respond to calls, you know, if there's a problem.
The burden is on the government.
In that case. But in the examples I just gave with the phone, you pick up the phone, you've got a dial tone, you can make your call, versus the iPod or whatever device you're using where you can get access to musical content. One is governmental kind of infrastructure, and the other is private sector. So I don't know, like with GIS or the geospatial technologies or data, how those all fit together.
From what we're doing is we're tying in so many different sources of information.
Yeah.
From our visualization technologies that we've been pushing out, it's as you're needing those different feeds, you check a box. It's as simple as that, right? I think your answer as far as serving out pictometry imagery with Google, it should lie not necessarily just with Google. The answer should lie with the client, right? The clients that need the information. Right now there's a huge push with GOI and Google, the way they're pushing it out on Earth Builder, right? The idea is to come up with a fashion or a method by which you're charging by location and currency, possibly, right? The currency of information, how often is it being updated, and do I want that update coming to me as often as I need it? And then which areas do I need at what times? So those combination of those things and types of data, you can split it up to different types and formats. I think that's a really good pricing model for a lot of the solutions that we're putting together. So could be a strategy for other agencies too.
Did I understand you to say that there could be possible transaction fees tied to the currency of information?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
When you say governmental entities,
Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm the only government employee here. We're here
It's
to help.
it's a combination of both. I mean, at the end of the day, government still has to maintain and manage the content, so.
But providing a solution, looking at the bureaucracy in which we live in governmental bureaucracy, I don't see the big solution, that's the cool engine that Mladen has put the graph up already, as coming out of the governmental sector. I mean, we're still in that stovepipe of this is the way we always do GIS in that mentality, as opposed to, a good example, Nancy Von Meyer calls a couple months ago, or last summer, wildfires in the West, and her server keeps going down, her software keeps going down. We knew nothing of fusion tables, took us a couple hours in the office. It got the job done. Was it official? Was it, authoritative? No, but she needed a solution. We didn't know what we were doing at the time, but it answers the question. Thus, that's kind of the consumer model. It works until you don't like it, and then you get rid of it.
And Fusion Tables is a free software, right? I mean, you're not paying any money, you're going with the open source solution. And that's what we can do now, is not necessarily think within the confines of software that's built just for geospatial needs, but outside of that, where there's a lot of open source free solutions.
I have a question for you, Mo, just because I'm not seeing any hands at the moment. You have met the needs of a lot of your customers, and you're using whatever technologies are available to you. It seems like you've got a lot of, not the answers, but you've got a lot of answers that satisfy the needs. What are the dilemmas that you're facing? Because I haven't heard a lot about that. We haven't heard a lot about that.
Well, it's at the end of the day, when we go into any client site, it's always that they've already got an idea of what they want because they've talked to so many people, they've attended all these geospatial conferences, and they know that the answer is in the reporting tool for this particular software that they've already purchased. And for example, right, so reporting tools, when you're working with operations typically, or some of these systems that can't or should not ever go down, right? You cannot just base it on existing reporting tools within proprietary solutions sometimes. You have to go to the back engine. So you have to think out of that box and explain to your client that not all the answers are just within what you've purchased, but in the underlying databases and resources that drive that content. And so one of the major dilemmas is definitely that preconceived notion that all the answers are already built by these different software vendors, but when in fact you already have the answers in your existing repositories. That's one. There's other types of issues that we've run into where people are so invested in specific technologies that it's very difficult for them to think out of that box. It's very similar to my first dilemma, but it's kind of goes hand in hand. Pat and I were discussing this commercialization of technologies and software and how things have been pushed out and fed to all these people. But at the end of the day, your answers you already have. As far as geospatial, I come from the mindset that everybody already has a GIS. You don't need to build an entire infrastructure to support and build a geospatial technology. Every database, every server would have that. Now all you have to do is match the keys to a mapping visualization system. So if that's sort of the top two components that I see.
That's good. Thoughts? Comments?
I would say that it sounds like you're advocating the cloud for this cloud.
Can you grab the mic? Ingram, just get it in front of her, please. Thank you.
It sounds like you're advocating the cloud idea and advancing that, where people are providing data just kind of routinely to a common interface. It almost seems to me that some of the most effective things I've seen for community participation is like open street mapping. And it gets back to, you know, what is the data? And I almost feel like a point, dealing with points as the common data source can actually provide, you know, a lot of opportunities to build structure. Because sometimes we end up with you know, these polygons, which are really, you know, derived from points anyway. And I almost feel like if we just had this kind of common point structure, that we could, you know, we can continually expand that. Like it's almost like it's like too formalized.
I'm sorry, I'll just quickly address part of that. The thing is that, yes, the cloud is definitely a direction that should be considered by most agencies, but we work with, you know, DODs and DHSs, and there's no way stuff is going out. And so most of these solutions are also internal. From our standpoint, what we try to push is that when you're sharing content or generating information, you provide it in multiple ways, right? First thing we do is provide like a data.gov information available. Of course, data.gov just provides everything. There should be a fashion and a format by which you can just pull information within a specific space. So you're just pulling geographically referenceable information from a data.gov. Secondly, we provide a common operating picture, so you don't have to, you know, think, and that common operating picture can be content sitting inside your intranet or externally within the cloud. It's just so happens it's easier to do it on the cloud in a lot of ways. And then the third thing is custom mashups. So providing information in a way that custom mashups any programmer could do, right? So to understand the fact that every agency, entity, individual might come up with a consensus of what a map for their particular field should look like, but when you're providing that map, you want to provide the pieces, parts and pieces with it. So if you're clicking on a particular point, you're not just providing that geospatial map and that content, you're providing the image that's as a reference. So what we do is called a URI reference. So with the URL, you can call any type of content. So if I'm looking at a map, I see a point, I see a description about that point, I see an image, I see videos, all that. Each of those things can be referenced within the URL. So I can reference just an image and not the entire application, or just the video and not that group of things. So,
Hey,
Angela?
Danielle, just one thing to add to that. I like your idea on the point. We've actually investigated. You guys can hear. We've investigated a text on something called an information cloud, which is, and the reason we did that was because we have LiDAR sensors, airborne digital sensors, terrestrial sensors, and we're looking at how do you go to a sort of a generic primitive, as you pointed out, a point, and tie X, Y, Z to that point in time, and then add a pixel to that point, and then connect that point to information, and then use on-the-fly algorithms or geoprocessing to
I think, Angela, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I kind of wanted to address the thing that was mentioned about the Roku. And I think that was and then you talked about the Apple ecosystem. And I think that what we're all thinking about here is along the same lines. It's all kind of in the same perimeter. But to be able to make geographic information just another bit of information that can be streamed or made available to a wide audience for consumption, much like the iCloud or the iTunes sort of idea. And there are, I think that there are paradigms out there for enabling that, yeah, like we have to get outside of our box, our Esri box, our ERDAS box. We have to get outside that box and look at these things like GML or GORSS or some of those other tools that are out there and see how could they be utilized to maybe feed from something like a point-based database, an open source database, feed the information to the geoprocessing tool that can sit out there. You know, so I think that it's just that nothing's been connected, except maybe with some of your tools. But I think that we're just thinking inside of our box too much and not, you know, looking at the broader context.
Exactly. We're not, the geospatial professionals, oh, we know where to get this data set, or we know how it's stored here, we kind of do this. It's amazing that GIS people are like this, but we are, and I'm one of them. But that, I don't know that it exists. I don't believe it does exist yet, but as a consumer, you know you can go get it. You're just answering that one question. I don't care about getting the entire street center line for the entire state of Georgia to answer my question. I just want to answer a question. So I think as GIS people, we're still doing the same old thing, but we're not a consumer yet. We're not thinking we're not thinking at home to say, I just want to answer this question. And that's what I've seen drive other industries. It just hasn't driven ours yet.
We're speaking very abstractly. I want to make sure I kind of get this down so that we can take something away from this conversation. We're missing an information engine, for lack of a better term, because we don't have one right now. And we're thinking as a group that's something that can tie various apps and various data together.
It goes back to most point. We have, I like the notion that we all have a GIS, something there, but what we need is the information, and there's so much data out there, and now LiDAR, terrestrial, GPS, surveying, but it's stacked away somewhere, and it's stacked away in compartments. We need, and whether it's a point primitive, we need a common way of we need a format. I'm trying to pick the right word. Format sounds a little proprietary because it should be open. We need something that people can contribute to describing the world and be able to. If I'm walking around like this and I see something happening, I take a picture and I contribute that somewhere. And it just because it's got a GPS tag, it knows how to tie it to the information about it. And then someone can search and find that and get that picture and make a decision on it. We all need to be connected dynamically to this information cloud, both internally, because internally we all have a GIS, we all have that information in cloud, but it's all in someone's desktop on this server and things. It's not actually a cloud, it's all like independent files. We have data model, I don't know if that's the right word, but we need something, a persistence model that will allow us to publish, consume, connect, and get raw content through automated geoprocessing to get the information.
I don't think that exists, and we're all struggling with that, but I see as the sensors, as you're talking about, as more and more data, we're getting crushed by data every day. So we're coming up against this pressure wall almost. Somebody's got to make it happen. Whoever makes it happen is going to be rich. But the amount of data that's coming in is just exponentially increasing, as Mo said.
The part that I'm missing in my mind is we have a point primitive cloud. We have latitude and longitude. I mean, every point has a known location, right? So our issue right now, everybody's problem, even though we all have data, that can be visualized is relating the data back to that point primitive cloud. I guess that's what you're talking about is the engine, but what's
The engine is the thing that connects to that floating information cloud and can do dynamic processing based on the information request that's made. So if I want to do a request and say, if I build this residential development in this area, I want to know the impact to the local watershed or something like that. It's just a generic modeling question. Having asked that question, I need to be able to get terrain data, image data, feature data, attribute data, some other model information, and execute that process, and whether it's through Google or Filter or some other open source or proprietary system. I got to be able to connect to the data. Right now, to execute that, I need to know where the data is, what format it's in, reproject it, make sure it all lines up, make sure the attribute information is there, write the model to actually do it. I need to know how to model. A lot of people don't know how to model. That's a lost art. People just don't know how to model it. And then finally, I hopefully will get something that I can then put on a map and show to someone who can then make a decision. And that's hard. I mean, that's hard.
okay?
We need to get from hard to easy.
Yeah.
And I think there's a data problem, there's a software problem, there's a modeling problem, there's a quality problem. I mean, these are all problems we can solve, but you have to start somewhere. And we are speaking abstractly here, Danielle.
Oh, of course. I just wanted to document
Like
it
there isn't
somehow.
anything out there that was, I don't know, that can do this today.
I just need a way to
Rats at Hexagon.
No,
articulate
we
it.
don't have it. We don't have it. We're talking about it. We don't have it.
Good. We'll take one or two more comments, and then actually let's hear from JB. We haven't heard from you yet, and then I want to kind of review the highlights with you guys before we break for lunch. Oh, I'm sorry. Ann was next, and then JB.
My problem is I'm going back to the zoom in and zoom out. I mean, I'm zooming in to the risk analysis, really mission critical type of situation, and I'm going to the consumer who just wants to know where the closest restaurant is between here and MARTA, right? I think they're different problems. We have a lot of this already. I mean, a few years ago, I used to have 8 different search engines. I'd put a question in and I'd have 8 search engines come up and give me all the answers. Now how many do I use? I use 1, right? And I think that's kind of it. The consumer will drive part of this, and we're going to have to deal with that. The other part is the mission critical, where you are a county or you're an entity and you're going to get sued if you don't update your data correctly. So anyway, that's just a comment, that dichotomy there.
I just had a comment that Google now has purchased all of the NetSat archive, all of it. And at the recent ASPRS meeting in Sacramento, one of the Google folks showed us they've got a geoprocessing engine. You can go to any part of the world, and then you choose the vintage, what time, what date, etc. You pull up the Landsat imagery, and you can do classification on the fly right there. So seminal forms of this technology are there, and very soon, you could pull in soil layers, this, that, and the other, topographic data, and these things will be ubiquitous soon enough.
And obviously, Google had a business case for that, right?
Yes.
So there was something driving that.
What's their business case? Who's their business user? It's the same as ours. That's what I don't understand. I don't understand why GIS professionals are still in selling mode and trying to make the awareness and still build the infrastructure, where Google gets it and they know there's money and they know there's need in it and they're going ahead with it. They're not dealing with a different population than we are. It's the same population. So what's the disconnect there? Does anybody have any idea? Because that perplexes me. I mean, if the banks wanted it, I totally agree with you. If the banks wanted a national parcel database, they'd have it like that. Why is Google putting the parcels across the country into their, why is Google going ahead with that without the banks saying they need it?
I think, Danielle, if Google were to implement a revenue sharing model that if people were to collect content and upload it to the Google Cloud and they got something for it, every time someone used it, there was a brokering model where every time someone used a parcel from an county and someone performed a search and they paid for that,
The county
and
would
the
get
county
it.
got something back, they'd be in.
Actually, that would happen.
Google didn't have to go and get a grant to figure out how many real estate agents are using da-da-da-da-da, or how many HR managers need to know where people live. They don't have to know that. They have to know what questions is anybody asking? Let's throw content. And if it's not successful, they walk away from it because they're not selling the content. They're selling clicks on a page.
But the content is driving the clicks on the page.
And if it doesn't drive it, they throw it away.
But it is driving it, which is why they're investing in it. So why aren't we?
Because it's not an ROI for them. They have a certain amount of investment. They will try a dozen different things. I mean, at the Google pages you look at right now, every time we look at a Google page, there's a decent chance that it's different than the guy sitting next to us, the same search. They are constantly testing. And if they can't find people using it, they'll throw it away.
In this space, though, as far as geospatial data goes, they're expanding. I mean, now they're adding Landsat data, they're adding geospatial capabilities. Before, they were just taking whatever data they can find. Now they're acquiring data. They identified already that there is a demand for this content.
They're actually building sensors. They're building their own sensors only because we're trying to sell them sensors. They're building their own sensors to fly data. I know that because we're trying to sell them sensors.
So just given their trend, they do identify that there is a demand for this. This test has succeeded, and now they're continuing into a business area.
They can identify demand, but they don't have the ROI.
Yeah, that's true. They don't, because they're getting money. I mean, coming from a vendor that we're publicly traded in Europe, we have to, and I'll speak for all software vendors, whether they're public or private. In an economy, you have to make money. I mean, if you don't make money, you have to unfortunately lay people off, and you got to change your business. And Google is making a lot of money doing search and ads and that sort of thing, and they have the flexibility and the ability to invest in other projects. I know some of my friends that work there, and they get huge investments, and they don't have to put a business plan together. Someone does a skunkworks project over the weekend, they show it to their manager, they actually encourage that sort of behavior and allow people to do that. But I think Google is, their motto is trying to, organizing the world's information. Geospatial information or location information is critical to understanding our Earth with time, especially with all the natural disasters, all the things happening. They know that. So when you do a search, it always ties back to location. Where, what, how, when, you know, and so forth. So that's why geospatial is critical to them. It's an ingredient they recognize, and Apple is going down the same road right now. Apple is investing heavily in geospatial technology. I have friends that work there as well. And on the 3D side, on doing exactly what Google's doing, and Microsoft's already there with Excel.
I'm getting charged up. I feel like having a debate.
Yeah.
All right, so.
Well, because they're going to also sell you at that point, they're going to sell the data. So for every person that clicks, they get to sell that data point.
But I think that's where the revenue model and I can't remember where, it might have been Gwinnett County. I went to the Gwinnett County website. It was like a year ago. I was looking for something, I can't remember. And Gwinnett County's website was more up to date than Google is, and Microsoft was. And it actually took them about a year to get up to date. But imagine if Gwinnett County had uploaded and published their content onto Google, and there was a model where in Gwinnett County, their GIS IT department would get coins on the dollar every time someone used it. I think that would, in these economic times, would actually help people publish data. So
From a local perspective, that would certainly help. Right now, I'll give you a perfect example. Google and Microsoft are now investing their resources as return on investment to put imagery. Let's just stick with imagery. Do I invest my time in pushing a program through government sources or methods to get imagery for my county? Well, if I'm going to do it for myself and not work with states and feds, it's going to cost me about 150 grand to fly once, and it's a 6 to 9 month project. Or do I mash up what's out there on Google Earth, Google Maps, and Bing, and give it to my constituents for free? Which is, what am I looking at? Maybe I have to wait an extra year and the data are only updated every 2 years. But I do have local content that is updated every day. And if they wanted to enter into that arena, man, that would solve, because honestly, look, local governments, every site you go to is different, right? Most all of them different. It would be so much easier to our constituents if my mom looks stuff on Google Maps. Well, gosh, if she could look up stuff on every county website that's in Google Maps, better for her, she doesn't have to figure out how to use those counties. Perfect. It would work. And I'd be happy to do it. I know a lot of other counties that would be happy to do it. Takes burden off us.
We have a comment over here that's been just waiting and waiting and waiting.
I just wanted to clarify that primitive point format idea, and it's not that we don't already have point locations for all of our data structures. It's just that they have a more developed form, and I'm actually advocating deconstructing the form back to points. So if you have 1,000 by 1,000 image, you actually have 1,000,000 points. So you're actually putting out the points instead of, and if you have a polygon, it's the perimeter of the polygon, every XY vertex. And the attributes would be associated with each point. So it's basically a single data model with attributes.
Thank you. I'm going to wrap it up now because it's little after, well, it's almost noon, and I kind of want to catch these highlights before we break for lunch. We're going to have another great lunch, so don't leave if you don't have to. It's hot, full, yummy. And then I do hope to wrap up the entire conference during our meal so that we review all the highlights from all the panels and make sure we all feel comfortable with that and see if we can find any common threads. So from today's panel session, I kind of was doing more note-taking than, succinct highlight taking, but what I pulled is as follows. But before I do this, does anybody want to offer any nuggets that they feel that I can capture quickly? Like what really stood out for you or resonated with you with this discussion? Okay, so what I noted was that having geodata or geo apps, geo applications that speak a variety of local languages is necessary to having relevant technology for everyone. And we did discuss that standards kind of serve that purpose as a common language, but they're too cumbersome, and changing standards, well, there's too many, and that changing from one to another is too cost prohibitive. So the geo community is still stuck in the cassette player mode. We're not yet at the MP3 mode. And I like these analogies. It really helps to kind of wrap your head around something. Highlight 2, data acquisition firms need funding to keep their programs alive. And that doesn't necessarily need to be firms. I guess it could be organizations, like Gwinnett County, for example. So therefore, how do you get the data to the masses? And I think we actually came up on not a firm solution, but a potential avenue for further exploration, really. I really like the ideas that were coming out here at the end. Does everybody agree with this? Does anybody want me to modify the language in any way, or can think of a better way to word it? Potential funding avenues, this was just kind of, to me, another nugget, like transaction fees tied to the currency of information, and if you could share that between the provider, the source of the information, and the vehicle provider, how great is that? Everybody wins. So, I mean, we kind of actually have been talking about this throughout the whole panel, and we just kind of, I think, formulated it at the end there. Highlight 4, everybody already has a GIS. I don't know if I totally agree with that, but this is what I heard the consensus saying. But that accessing back-end source data opens many opportunities. And if you're not tied to any one particular technology or any one particular psychological way of doing things, mental models, then you can find so much more value in the data that you already have. So we're missing this information engine that can dynamically geoprocess from a point primitive cloud to data that people own or capture. Let me say own. Whoops. Are you guys, am I documenting this accurately based on our conversations? Does anybody have any heartburn over the way I've written any of this stuff? Consume, connect, publish, I liked that little catchphrase. Data's a problem, software's a problem, modeling is a problem right now, so we just need to ease the whole workflow process. And then what we're missing, again, is a business model for Google or, whomever, to share revenue clicks with data contributors. And maybe if we could come up with that business model, everybody would win, again, because you could encourage more regular or real-time contributions of data. You could reduce the effort, you know, from a county maintaining its own information than Google going to the county, getting its data and putting it on their platform, or Google or other. You can get data to the masses faster in a common platform, you know, that they're used to working with and seeing. And that sounds like a great idea.